it's overwhelming thinking of the things that we're going through together right now. I know that I am always thinking of tomorrow.
Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with DC-based entertainer, artist, veteran, and entrepreneur Aaron Myers. We had a wide-ranging conversation in mid-March 2021 about life, upcoming projects, a book and a CD, and so much more. Originally from Goodlow, Texas, he found passion for performing at an early age while playing music in the church. That led him to the United States Army, college, Los Angeles, and now Washington, D.C. Over the years, he's done quite a bit, like working for the Obama Campaign for Change in 2008 as a field organizer and being an advocate for mental health and LGBT rights, along with so much more. He's got a very rich, vibrant story. Enjoy.
Hey, I'm good, man. Thanks for taking a minute out. I'm glad you all reached out to me.
Oh, I'm glad you accepted our at least offered the invitation. We appreciate you getting back to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you've had quite a history in jazz.
I've had a unique history, and it's been a fun ride, and I hope that the ride is just beginning.
Let's go ahead and start off here, and I guess the biggest thing that's probably been a part of not only the jazz world, but every single phase of our existence has been this pandemic. And how has this pandemic been for you? What has it been like for you, for your career, and for, how everything's been going project-wise?
The week, at least here in Washington, D.C., when we shut down, it was also the week I had to cancel my festival that I was going to be headlining in France, in Normandy, France. And for the first month or so, it was nothing but cancellations and rescheduling, and people optimistically rescheduling for the fall. And we now all know that all of those were eventually canceled altogether. And so for the first few months, I did work with a therapist and a counselor to kind of just grapple. A lot of times people hear the music, but they forget about the humanity of musicians, that we are human too. And it was mentally and emotionally, as everyone else, quite exhausting, especially when your Facebook page turns into an obituary section. I lost family members and dear friends of mine who I've known for years and who've been in my home passed away to COVID. I myself have antibodies. I actually just got my first shot Saturday. From a human aspect, the weight has been almost unbearable. From a professional standpoint, I don't believe that I realized how much of my sanity I derived from being on stage and performing this music. Being on stage with fantastic musicians, it's almost like having a mastermind class on a regular basis. And this mastermind happens with the meeting of the minds on stage. And I didn't realize how much my professionalism, how much of my therapy, how much of my individualism was found on the piano or behind the microphone. And so during this time for me professionally, I really delved head first, that is, in doing my best to lead and work with the DMV music stakeholders, which is District, Maryland, and Virginia. And what we really did our level best to do was to offer relief and find ways to petition the government to make sure the music ecosystem was propped up and considered rather than being left out or getting what was left after everything else was done. We acknowledged that the music community was probably the first to close and will more than likely be the last to open. And I think that in every jurisdiction in this country, there should be no reason why we as artists or musicians should go back to the way things were before COVID, with some of the ills still there. I think we should use this time, and what we've tried to do is use this time to make sure that when we come back to a more equitable space for music, for all people involved.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the point of all of this, is how well things get recalibrated so they come back stronger and in a different way. And it's probably one of the things that will be a silver lining out of all of this is, the world of music, and more specifically jazz, has been a place that probably needed to have some restructuring and regrouping to begin with.
Well, when we think about some of the inequity, most musicians make about $100 a gig to a degree. That's not right. Most clubs have not been thrust into the 21st century yet. Most clubs and most restaurants that offer music have not had a dedicated social media person, dedicated advertising budget, a dedicated budget meant for the music, having adequate sound and staging in clubs. And I'm talking about for, the indie scene and out there on the ground, those clubs that we all love to go to. From a professional standpoint, going on touring and things of that nature, stronger partnerships could be developed between festivals and also some of the larger venues throughout the United States. If anything, the U.S. could really model itself off of some of the things that have been done in Europe. Whenever I've been in Europe, or in 2019, I did a 20-city tour in Russia, and they had it together. They had it right over there, man. And I think that we could do the same thing here in the States when it comes to this particular music, and really divorce ourselves from the notion that jazz is something that's only liked by old people, because that's simply not true.
Yeah, and I think that's been the thing that I've realized more and more. I think I've always kind of known that, but I've realized it more during this pandemic, talking about the dollars and cents and the logic behind it, is that at the end of the day, the Europeans do see art and culture as a part of the vitality and health of their population, and they are more than willing to support that financially. I mean, even with festivals and different things like that. And I keep thinking about this pandemic. If we didn't have Netflix, we didn't have music, streaming services, downloads, we didn't have movies and TV and all of that, there's no way we would have made it. The only reason why this collective society of ours, other than theology and some other things that are very strong bonds for human beings, that kept it together, was because of the arts.
Well, not only that, during this time we saw a increase in vinyl sales. There had been, I believe, a fire in one of the lacquer companies, and so the world, and the United States specifically, is on a backlog of vinyl. With the new album I'm preparing to release on April 30th, from the time we put out our masters and gave them the music, the files, it's going to be a 14 to 21 week wait for people to get vinyl, for us to get the vinyl back to distribute, just because there's such a high demand. Vinyl has outsold CDs during this time. And we know people who are buying these things are young people. You go to Target now, you can buy a record player. You have options. You can buy a portable record player. You can buy a huge system if you want to that includes vinyl, a turntable. So I think we need to really understand and give our audiences more credit than what we have been giving them so far. I know in years past when we would do Jazz Congress in New York, and they would have all these panel discussions on, how much could jazz really sell and how much could jazz do this, that, and the other. This pandemic has shown us that people need art. People look to art to get through tough times and do this elongated, strong struggle we've all been through. Jazz has been a savior to many people.
So talk to me about the new album. You just mentioned that you have one coming out. Give me an idea about the name of it, when's it coming out, and kind of what's behind it.
Yeah, it's called the Pride album. I'm a Leo, and I always think of the lion's pride. And so my pride are my ancestors, all those who've gone on before. And every room I walk into, every platform I'm on, it's crowded because they're there. And so the music from this album is meant to invite other people to join my pride, my family. Hopefully they will resonate with the music and invite me to join their family. It comes out International Jazz Day on April 30th. The first single actually comes out this Friday on the 19th, yes, this Friday the 19th. And the title, the first single from it is called Please Take Care of You for Me, and it is a song that was inspired by a woman by the name of Calvin Colbert. She was a good friend of mine. I've known for a few years, and she succumbed to cancer before the pandemic started. Actually, she died while I was on tour in Russia. But our last conversation and her lasting words with so many people, although she herself was suffering and dying, really, she always encouraged people to take care of you for me, and the response should be, and I'll take care of me for you. And I think this is what kind of shaped and given me comfort throughout this pandemic. This album, we have people like Chris Funds on bass, Sam Prather on piano, Dana Hawkins, the drummer, who he's done well publicity-wise in the drum magazines and industry magazines during this pandemic. He's on drums, and Herb Scott, he's the executive director of the Capitol Hill Jazz Foundation, and a fantastic saxophone player. He's with me there too. We put together a really award-winning team to put out some music that we hope the audience resonates with. We are looking to show really the true spectrum of jazz, ranging from the classic roots and the second line type of work to some more contemporary jazz stuff.
So talk to me a little bit about your childhood, where you were born and raised, and how music became your life.
I was raised in Goodlow, Texas. It's a sharecropping community, about 340, at the time, 312 people. Now it's only 264 because people have died and moved away. But my family's resided in Texas since about the 1850s when we were brought there. And so growing up in this insular community, I can't imagine a picture of my life without music or the piano, because it's my earliest musical memories are with me at the piano. I'm always shocked when people tell me they can't play it, because to me, it seems like something that everyone should be able to play. It's a code that I've been somewhat blessed with. And as far as vocally, I've grown up with a musical family. My fondest memories are singing around the kitchen table, especially during holidays when all the aunts and cousins have come in from out of town, come down from the big city of Dallas or come up from the big city of Houston to join us. And so I remember those times, and those shaped me. I first heard my first jazz record with my grandparents. They had those old 32 clay records, and it was a 1931 edition of Louis Armstrong's Gut Bucket Blues. And for years, that's when I thought of jazz, I thought of General Morton, Louis Armstrong, Fats Waller, people of that nature. And my mother introduced me to Herbie Hancock when I was in high school, and then I just became blown away by it. Of course, the church shaped my sound and my soul, and that greatly influenced any other genre I've ever sung with, particularly jazz. And people, a lot of people forget that the father of gospel music was a jazz and blues musician, Thomas Dorsey. He played for Ma Rainey, actually. So I've taken a lot of that with me into the jazz realm when I sing this particular music. Of course, we did band in high school growing up, but a lot of those old rerun television shows from the 50s and 60s, if you listen to the scores of those shows, the big band arrangements, they really influenced and shaped me a great deal, especially the Time Warner condensed records that had a lot of the great hits on it from the 40s and 50s and 60s. And so those things really shaped me from a musical standpoint.
You went on to the Army, and then you went on to college. Give me an idea of how this path worked out for you.
I went to college, and I went to the Army first. I was 17 when I joined, predominantly because I didn't want to go to college yet. School had worn me out, really. But I knew that if I wanted to go to college, my mother, as a single mom, there was not an abundance of scholarships available to anyone, really, where I'm from. And so we could not afford it, and it was just clear to me. And so I went to the military in hopes to be able to afford college. As I was finishing my AIT, I injured my back, and so I had to reclassify as a radio telecommunications specialist there. And then upon the completion, my first sergeant, they discharged me so that I could have some type of job that could be transferable in the civilian world, and I went into college. When I was in college, though, I directed the gospel choir there and did music there as well. I got into college. I directed the gospel choir at Navarro College. A lot of people will know Navarro College from the television show Cheer that was just on Netflix. I also was on the cheerleading squad. I was the mascot for the college. And with that, I was introduced to theater and being able to really get on stage and act and really carving out what the really full entertainer looks like. I do comedy, I can dance, I can ballroom, I sing, play piano, and I act. After leaving college, and while I was in college, I ran for the office of mayor there in Corsicana, Texas. At 20, I lost. However, a lot of my ballot initiatives were passed and introduced to the public by those who were elected, so it says a lot about my forecast on the city, and a lot of the coalitions I created while I was there are still in existence 20 years later or so. And I moved from Texas to Los Angeles and really started to get my chops together in jazz and entertainment, being on stage, doing comedy, doing some acting while I was there. You know, you can throw a dead cat and get 15 actors easily, out-of-work actors easily in L.A. And so from there, I heard about Barack Obama, and I wanted to be a part of history if possible. And I decided to take a break from entertainment and to see if I could create a memory or help create history in 2008. I joined his campaign. And after his campaign, that's what brought me to Washington. And I was able to re-enter the jazz and the music field full-time in a space where this city, Washington, D.C., really celebrates and lifts up, supports jazz artists and a really robust jazz scene.
So there's a very defined path and very defined ways that you are. And I'm going to ask you how these all relate to the vigor and the fortitude you have for what you're doing. So you went from the Army to running for mayor as a bisexual man, and you became, and you entered the jazz realm. How do all of these cross-pollinate with you and make you who you are and give you the drive that you have?
Well, it's a sense of service, to be quite frank with you, because that's what I saw growing up. My grandparents kept a half-acre garden behind their home as I grew up, and it was a community space. No one ever helped them pay for anything. They planted and tilled and plowed a garden in the back, and anybody in the community could come and get what they needed. And I was always taught, it was instilled upon me, I would walk our small community along with my grandmother, and she would go and visit the sick, and she would go and help clean and help make sure so-and-so was taken care of. And those are memories that I can't forget. So I view everything that I've done from a sense of service standpoint. Now, when it comes to being bisexual, at those times, I didn't grow up in a community where I saw anyone who was LGBT that I thought, now that I look back, they were all over the place, but they were really closeted in a sense. So, like, literally, I didn't have an example of what a healthy gay relationship looked like, what a healthy, we didn't talk about it. The only two people I remember who were in the LGBT community, both contracted AIDS, both died, one of which was my cousin, Tommy Brown, the gospel musician, who was probably most influential in person that I could see, who had experienced some success in music. But at that time, the way we viewed the LGBT community post-2010 versus pre-2010 in the 90s and in the early 2000s was completely different. During my time in the military, it was don't ask, don't tell. And you were frightened because if you were outed, you would be dishonorably discharged. And that went on your record. It negatively impacted how you were able to seek employment on the outside world. And the outside world really wasn't that all that embracing of the LGBT community. It wasn't until I went to Hollywood and lived in West Hollywood that I understood that there could be safe havens for people to really be embraced and to thrive. And growing up, I was not given even an opportunity to experiment. I knew that I was different. I knew that I was attracted to people of the same sex, but I had no opportunity, no space to experiment, no education around that. The church certainly was not doing that type of thing. And yet I was blessed with a family that to this day I have never once questioned whether or not they would love me or embrace me or lift me up or encourage me or love me. I'm fortunate. Sometimes some people don't have that same story, but I do. And so it's through their love and support that I have had the freedom to experience and experiment and discover who I am, and doing so even when it wasn't so popular. Before Joe Biden had gone on Meet the Press and declared his support for gay marriage. I remember during the campaign, one of the most hurtful times was when Barack was on, I think, the whatever church that was, he did an interview at, not the Saddle Ranch, for heaven's sake, whatever church that is. he did the interview, and he said he didn't believe marriage should be between a man and a woman. He believed in traditional, as they call traditional, marriage. And I never forget, I'm there. I've gained 20 pounds working on this campaign, working 7 days a week. And the person I'm working for hasn't affirmed me quite yet, and it was difficult, but I knew that change was going to come, and I still needed to work and do so the best way I could.
How do you use your platform as a musician and radio host to further those ideas of being an advocate for mental health and the LGBT community?
It's being authentic with it, really, and actually just doing it and ensuring that the platform that you're on, first of all, is a safe space and an inclusive space for everybody, regardless of who they love, what they look like, their ability or disability. Making sure that you yourself are striving, be mindful, and to operate in mindfulness in a sense. And on the bandstand, it was not always safe. I didn't always feel safe. There are musicians who didn't want to play with me. There are people who sometimes wouldn't come to the shows because I was open about, who I am. And with that, thank God times have changed. But with that, I made sure every club I played in, from the stage and even to the person who was booking me, that I was like, hey, please understand, my audience needs to be safe here. I need to be safe here. I want you to make sure that, and I say it from the stage, that people are safe. This is a safe space. That's the first way that I was able to do it. With this upcoming book, I wanted to make sure that I could tell the story of how there are many other factors that made me and influenced me to be who I am. And those factors are not to take the place of my sexuality, but they're to be included alongside my sexuality. That I've learned as much outside of the bedroom, outside of relationship, as I have learned within the bedroom and within my relationship, and to be honest about those experiences and how sometimes they influence both.
What does it mean to be a political advocate for a pro-diversity movement? I mean, we've obviously gone through a lot of tumult over the last 4 years. Lots of things, I think, have come to light that we thought maybe we had, at least eased a little bit with the Obama era. What is it like to continue to push for pro-diversity and push against this racial tide that's really bubbled up over, since the summertime?
Well, many of us we were doing it even during the Obama and definitely during the Bush administration. The first protest of anything that I kind of saw was my mother, with NAACP, as she was working to have the Confederate flag moved from above our courthouse in Texas. I would say trying to lead a pro-diversity movement or platform. I know the inauguration, I spent it in bed. The day that Joe Biden was inaugurated, I spent it today. Those people who've been on the front lines, first, you can't deem yourself an advocate. I always tell people that. The first time I ever saw my name and the word advocate put together, it was in the newspaper. I had nothing to do with it. And after seeing that, and then seeing it used often and almost congruently with what I do and the things that I've done when it comes to the public space, I realized that there was a certain responsibility that you needed to know as much of the facts as possible. Understand that there will be places for compromise, but understanding the difference between where does one compromise and then where does one hold the line. You can't compromise. For instance, here in Washington, D.C., we're dealing with an issue regarding amplified noise. It's targeted toward people who play music on the street in some of the cultural centers and cultural areas, namely by the convention center and by the arena. And with that, they called it noise, and that's the first problem. Music is not noise. The second thing is, there are people who are on the other side of this, who brought this issue and want certain laws passed. They don't want any music, live music on the street at all whatsoever. And with that particular person, there is no compromise. And understanding where there's not a compromise to be held, where you must hold the line, is important as someone who is trying to be an advocate. And during the last 4 years, we have been holding the line because this administration that we had, the previous administration that is, was not an administration that wanted to compromise. I had received word when Donald Trump had, before he was president-elect, and they were putting together his budget that he was going to be introducing once he was sworn in. And I got word that they had cut the NEA and the NEH. Usually Republican administrations may slash some of the budget, but they were calling to cut that piece of their own administration, those departments down altogether, the NEA and the NEH. And the only person in that administration who stood up against that was Rex Tillerson. He had just been, I think he was just nominated for Secretary of State. That was the tenor in which the last administration went in. So from a space of arts, we had to really hold the line because they didn't want us there to begin with. But then on the other side, from the LGBT issue, to see immediately them asking embassies not to fly the pride flag in other countries, to refrain from doing that, wanting to ban transgender people from the military, seeing things of that, seeing that they had not reappointed or they had not put significant work against the board that studied HIV and AIDS, to see that we had no presence really within the administration at all. To really see that, and then also have Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education, then Mike Pence, who has been the staunch leader against the LGBT community as the vice president. We were holding the line, at least I was, on multiple fronts, both with my humanity and, second of all, with the arts. Not to mention, I'm black, and you had supremacists, nationalists, making policy in the White House. I was exhausted in Inauguration Day.
Yeah, I'm floored that we, as a country, even have that many people that support him. I mean, just with what you said right there, without all of the other horrific atrocities that man has inflicted on the planet, the fact that he has even one person following him is beyond any logic model that I can even imagine. I mean, I've been a supporter of Obama. I've been Democrat. I subscribe to progressive politics. And I thought that it's time that George W. was in there and the Iraq thing was going on, that was atrocious. But what we had to go through for the last 4 years is beyond the pale, and the fact that there are still people out there that are under the delusion that there was some conspiratorial hang-up and all of the things that go into it. It's a fiction I never thought that we would live in. And then you take that and mince it with all of the racial and civic and civil upheaval that we've had. It's been an astonishing set of months that we've all lived through on this planet.
Well, police have been shooting black people for years. I mean, even Richard Pryor talked about it in his own stand-up comedy in the 70s. So, I mean, I distinctly remember the Craig Thomas incident that happened right after Rodney King in my county, where he died and he was killed in police custody, and the family was forced to settle with the city. My cousin actually was the president of the NAACP there and tried to help with that matter and tried to figure out how to create a good defense so that we could change the thing. The only thing he was able to change, I spoke to him about this when I wrote my last book, White People Talking to White People. I asked him about this, and he said what they were able to do was to ban the hog tie, how they would hog tie people, and the police would. That's what they were able to get that removed from policies and procedures. And to think that was even an option to begin with is just unimaginable. But what happened with George Floyd was the first time that we were able to grapple with this without the distractions of having to get up and leave the house and go to work. The pandemic truly had us all inside, and we all inside collectively together, both black, white, Hispanic, black, brown, whatever. We all saw this, and we all saw that the humanity had not been considered of George Floyd. We all saw that at the same time. It's the first time for many white people that the idea of racial inequity and injustice was brought from their peripheral to their purview. You know, and so then you had to address, well, where else have I been blind to these problems? You know, where else had I not been considerate of these particular issues? Because they went on during the Obama administration. That was what was so frustrating for many advocates. They had been going on during the Bush administration and during the Clinton administration as well. So the thing is that we have been fighting and fighting. So when George Floyd happened, for us to see thousands and millions of people take to the street during a pandemic, I went to the rally here in Washington, the Black Lives Matter Plaza, and before it was the Plaza, and we were tear gassed. And immediately, as we were tear gassed, or whatever chemical agent was used, I immediately got on the phone and I was texting city council people and emailing city council people like, how in the hell are we going to use some type of chemical agent that induces people to cough and to cry when we are in the middle of a pandemic that deals with your respiratory system? You have just created a super spreader event. And then come to find out, these are the president's own. This was the president's at their direction. This is how these things happened. So that first crew that was peppers or the chemical agent was used upon us before they did he had the photo op at the church. I was there. This happened to me.
Wow.
You know, and so I'm just baffled at this time that we are now with Joe Biden in office, and we are almost at seeing a space where there's some reckoning with these types of things. But we're not there yet. He has a diverse cabinet. He put together a diverse administration that I'm very proud of. And we're going to have to hold his feet to the fire. But the only reason I'm able to work on this album, and the only reason I'm able to release this book, by the way, Tall Tales and Lessons Learned, that comes out June 10th. The only reason I'm able to release the book is because he's in office, and I'm not having to hold the line so tightly for my own humanity and survival.
Yeah, the enormous domino that fell the minute that we all knew that there was going to be no more Trump was huge. The exhale in this country was massive, and we can only hope. You know, the one thing that I keep thinking, too, is that if there would have been any level of color other than a bunch of white people that would have been at that Capitol, there would have been so much blood spilled in that place, I can't even imagine. And that's the thing that kills me about all of this, is that there is such an incredibly high level of double standard in this country, but there is such a vacancy of empathy for so many people on the other side of the line that can't see it. I think really what it is, you know, without coming right out and saying it, I think there is a said political party that has encouraged the lack of education and the lack of knowledge in them that has led to this incurable stupidity and ignorance that we see rampant right now in this country. And it is totally and 100% solely their fault that this is happening right now, and it's turned into what it is.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. This is not, I mean, it's frightening to think that even Barry Goldwater would not be able to deal with this particular party. This is becoming closely to the type of country that Strom Thurmond would have wanted to see if he had won the presidency when he ran for office. What we are experiencing right now is a complete shirk of responsibility. You have a party full of enablers of people who've been in office 30, 40 years, you know, who have enabled this type of behavior and have stoked the fire. And the only thing that's been able to really hold most and much of this country together is the music, is the art, is the entertainment. This is the one thing that's been able to give us a reprieve, some hope, some dignity. And that's what my album, and this is what the book is meant to do. It's meant to offer some type of hope, reminding you of the humanity within yourself, the power within yourself, the goodness within yourself in some type of way. Hopefully you can read the story of the book and resonate and understand what it's like to have those grandparents who may have also been domestic and worked in the field. My grandparents are both sharecroppers. Having a single mom who worked. The first time I ever saw my mother cry was that years ago you used to be able to rent pianos. You know, that used to be a thing you could rent from a store. You have a store that sold pianos, believe it or not. And the first time I saw my mother cry was because she was unable to keep the payments up on the piano. And they came to take the piano away. And in my piano book, my lesson book, there was on the back page a diagram of a piano. And I grabbed my book and I ran to her and I told her, please do not cry, because I have a piano here, just only I can hear the notes. So don't worry, I can hear the notes. I see them and I can hear it. And she made a vow at that point that this would never happen again. That's the first time I remember seeing my mother cry.
Wow.
You know, that was during Reagan's years. Oh, no, that was Bush, early Bush, Reagan or Bush, yeah.
Yeah. So getting back to the music a little bit, what was the first live jazz show you saw that really moved you?
Well, the first, before I could say jazz, the first live concert I went to, I was very fortunate, and this helped shape me a great deal. I saw it at the Dallas racetrack, and I saw it was a double header, and it was Little Richard and Chuck Berry.
Wow.
Both of them influenced jazz, I would like to say, or musicians who play jazz, and worked with a lot of jazz musicians themselves. I would say the first jazz show that I would say that left an impact on me was at the Village Vanguard. I saw the Heath Brothers.
Wow, that's wonderful.
That was good, and I got a chance to spend some time with them both as well. So that was phenomenal. Growing up, there was not many jazz players at all in my small town. It was country and gospel, some blues. But seeing seeing the Heath Brothers at Village Vanguard was just amazing to me. Period. That would be it.
So what of these, like the Heath Brothers and other African American musicians, taught you about how to survive in the world of jazz, how to get your voice out there, how to thrive, how to be one that has a solid voice in the craft?
It's changed over the years, and it's a little difficult to equate the two because I remember Joe Williams did an interview once, and he stated that it's a shame that more rhythm players have not played this music to a dancing audience. And we talk about how well people like Art Blakey and the rest of them were able to keep, Chick Webb were able to keep time. It was because they were really playing this music for a dancing audience, an audience that was actually on their feet. And they experienced the euphoria and what it felt like to have this music played while people were actually moving and grooving to it. When we think of jazz, we often think of jazz post, Miles Davis, where you're told to sit down and shut up, right? So, wondering, by the time the 50s and 60s and 70s came along, and you're still dealing with people like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, even Miles and Quincy Jones even, they had cut their teeth in big bands, in spaces and swings, where these people had already been established radio stars. I mean, you look at one reason why Duke Ellington is Duke Ellington is because he was live on the radio from the Cotton Club, live on the radio. And so the other thing is that artists of the 50s, 60s, 70s, from the 20s and up until about the 70s, 80s, were able to ride the wave of a popular song because the licensing fees were not so great, and more labels and agencies, the management companies would pay those fees. so that you can ride the waves of that song. That's one of the reasons why some of the best hits you've ever heard, jazz or outside of jazz, were covers. Most of the early hits were jazz colors. Glenn Miller's orchestra first started with Begin to Begin, but that had been Cole Porter's number from Broadway years ago. You see what I'm saying? But it also had an evolution that happened many, many, many times. So today, I don't know if, and Lena Horne said this, said it best, she's not sure she can offer any advice to artists of this day, because the food is different. Even the clothes, the fabric in which you buy your clothes, that's different. And when you look at what was there at that time, it was not as great. There was no iTunes. There was none of this stuff was there. So if there was anything I was able to take from them, is how they were able to endure being on the road for 300 days out of the year. And doing so as people of color, usually in bad accommodations or having to sleep on the bus, they stuck with it. And they did not stop. What I've had to take. Do not stop. Continue to be innovative and continue to allow the current circumstance to be funneled through your music, when you get ready to articulate yourself on the stage. That's what I've been able to take from people like that, especially like Jimmy Heath. I mean, he just died last year, I believe, in 90. Wasn't he 90? Was Jimmy Heath 90?
Yeah.
I mean, just being able. Roy Haynes is still transcribing music, and he's in his 90s, and he's still going. For instance. So things like that.
So when we do return,
and stay away from heroin, and don't do heroin.
Yeah,
that's one thing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, totally. So things are getting better now. It seems like things are opening up. The vaccination's getting out there. When we do get back to the stage and we get back to the audience, what do you hope we all collectively realize about this long absence from live music?
Live music, you compensate your musicians. That's first of all. On the club level, as far as management and agencies, having your masters should be at the forefront of any deal that you do. I don't believe there should be really a plethora of free shows. I think that coming out of this club should have a clear marketing strategy and partnerships with their artists. I think the way that we approach Spotify, iTunes, and demanding more equity, fair payment schedules from the music that lives on their platforms and perpetually. We need to see some residual income that is greater from that. When it comes to things like writing. Being able to identify those publishers that want to work with artists, who want to work with those people in the LGBT community, being able to help get those stories out, to be able to, how can we identify our friends, in the industry altogether? Those are some things we should definitely do. I think we should adopt in this country the same thing that's done in many countries in France. I think musicians should have a living stipend. Without a shadow of a doubt, I believe musicians should have a living stipend, and it should be there without question.
Absolutely. So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're the one living your life. Who do you think you are?
That's a damn good question, sir. I am, when I think of this, and as you stated, I can't escape from being that little boy watching I Love Lucy and saying, I'd love to do that one day. Ricky played in a nightclub. He did music. He acted. I want to do that one day. And I'm still that boy hoping to realize that particular dream. There's no such thing as something for nothing. I don't have children. I'm not married. And although I love my family immensely, I don't live near them for the sake that they believe enough in in my craft and what I'm seeking to do. And I also believe, and the bargain is that if I'm going to be away from them, that I need to be just balls to the wall, like all in, doing what I need to do to make sure that I am really striving after this particular goal of art, entertainment, music. And so I'm still that little boy who is seeking to experience in reality what I just saw in I Love Lucy.
Right on. Before we sign off here, let everybody know where they can get your new CD when it comes out and your book.
So the single, Please Take Care of You for Me, comes out March 19th, and you can get that on every streaming platform that there is known. I think even Xbox Music will have it. But it's on every platform. And then the album, the Pride album, comes out April 30th. And I can announce on this show, I also recorded a live video album, so think of a Jazz Lemonade type of thing. And that's going to be presented April 30th, International Jazz Day, by the DC Jazz Festival, actually. And you'll be able to see that online through their website. You can go to my website, www.aaron2.me, aaron2.me, and to figure out information and find out more information about that. My book, By the Way, B-I, the Way, Tall Tales and Lessons Learned, comes out June 10th on what would have been my grandparents' 81st anniversary. They were married for 71 years. So June 10th is a very special day to me, and that book is very special, and it speaks of them in high regard and tells of all the lessons they taught me.
Beautiful. Aaron, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz. Good luck with the new projects and the return to the stage. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for doing what you're doing, and we need people like you, of course, during this pandemic. I appreciate it.
And thanks to Aaron for his time, music, and class. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.